right. Well, happy Friday, everyone, and welcome back to another weekly update, the Future Focus weekly update. I will continue doing these, just hitting on some of the biggest headlines and topics at the intersection of business, tech, and human experience. And first of all, let me give a shout out and thanks to all of you who are sending them along. I really do appreciate the emails and messages, just kind of saying, hey, what do you think about this? It does help keep things, one, at the top of my mind, but also help me tailor and personalize this to what everyone who's listening to this is actually most interested in versus just what's in my head. So it is the 16th. There are 4 items on my list to cover today. The first one has to do with a big move for OpenAI, which may come as an unexpected move for some folks, but it makes sense, and I'll explain kind of what's happening there. So an unexpected move with OpenAI. The second one is an article that was shared with me about is AI driving layoffs and some of the things that we're seeing. There's lots of layoffs, so I'll talk a little bit about that, where that came from. Another one is you can now, and there's a lot of hullabaloo about getting your bachelor's or master's degree in AI. I want to answer the question, is it a load of BS? Speaking of bachelor's in science. And then the fourth one is LinkedIn recently released its in-demand skills and what that is. So I want to talk a little bit about what that is and my thoughts on how that may influence the way you're thinking about your skills and how does this all fit into the mix of things. So with that, let's start, and let me just make a little note here on what this timing is. So let's start with the Wall Street Journal article that was shared with me on Sam Altman. If you have not heard, OpenAI is making a play, and they're actually looking for, get this, $7 trillion. Now you can go write the number of zeros that is, and then take a look at that and go, holy cats. But he is seeking $7 trillion for OpenAI to get into the semiconductor industry, which is basically the chips that are needed to help power all of this AI and all the processing power that goes into it. Now, this is largely sparked from some of the international political challenges we've had. A lot of the chips today are made over in Taiwan and in Europe, or not in Europe, in the Asian region. So there's been some tension politically, which has led to some things slowing down, which has resulted in some of these companies going, hey, rather than being at the mercy of these other regions, these other countries, why don't we get into the business ourselves? Now, this to me is going to become yet another one of these pseudo arms wars that we see, because OpenAI is not the only one in this mix. NVIDIA has been playing this game for a while and continuing to try and address this gap, because what you may not know is, as this technology continues to advance, there is a high demand for better, more powerful processors and just more of them in general to be able to power all this stuff. And then the question comes down to, like, well, who's going to make them? Where are we going to get them? And I think what OpenAI is doing is going, well, rather than wait on everybody else and be always kind of in a waiting game, why don't we get into the business ourselves? This is going to be interesting to watch. I mean, Apple's been a part of it. If you followed what Apple did, they got into their own M series. They used to run on Intel processors. Now they run their own chipset. Intel, obviously, big player in the game. AMD. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with this. But I think, it's one of the things that I will just say, it is creating a ceiling for AI advancement. So the lack of supply for chipsets and the ability to continue innovating on these things. And again, it's just a big operational bottleneck, which, if you've listened to my stuff before, this does go back to, even whether you're an environmentalist or not, this does go back to, these chips have to be made out of something. They're made out of silicon. That there's only a limited supply of silicon on the planet. So there's a whole supply chain thing going on here in terms of companies trying to step into this market. So you might go, $7 trillion. What on earth would you need $7 trillion? Well, you're looking at the raw manufacturing of this stuff and putting this stuff together. But OpenAI is making a play. And I actually think, if you're watching the financial side of this is going to be a booming industry as more and more companies try and differentiate by building their own hardware. It's interesting. I recorded a conversation this week. I haven't launched it yet, but we were talking about, it's interesting watching the technology cycle go full circle now, because back in late 90s, early 2000s. It's all about hardware. It's all about chipsets and all this stuff. And then it hit kind of a ceiling. And now we're getting back into the hardware space again, more people kind of wanting to play in that space. So it will be interesting to see how that goes. I think where we go, and the reason this matters is, we talk a lot about how fast the pace of change is with technology. And a lot of people who had their hair, or if you're like me, no hair, but your beard blown back, whatever. But a lot of people last year just were blown away by how quickly the technology advanced. What's been interesting, and this very much aligns with some of my predictions coming into 2024, is we're starting to hit that ceiling. We're starting to hit the ceiling of the innovation, kind of like back in the day when I think back to like the Pentium 133 came out, then the 233, then, and then it was a dual core, and then it was a quad core, and things were moving super fast. And then it kind of got to a point where it was like, well, how much further are we really going to push this? And it took a bit, and the innovation timeline was slower. I think we're seeing some of the same things in the AI business, which OpenAI is trying to get in front of by saying, hey, if we can get into the market ourselves, maybe we can keep pace. But all that to say, if you're not seeing AI just jump and transform by leaps and bounds, this would be one of the reasons why, is some of the supply and just capability limitations on the chipsets out there that are powering this stuff. But given the fact that AI is an inevitability, it's not going anywhere, and there is so much pressure to push this forward. We're just going to see companies like OpenAI and others just push harder to try and solve the problem so that they can keep pace. But this is allowing a little bit of breathing room for us who may be experiencing that change fatigue. All right. Shifting over, number 2 is on an article that was shared with me by on Bloomberg that was talking about, hey, is AI actually driving these layoffs? If you've been watching companies left and right, there's a lot of layoffs that have been happening in the early part of the year. And so this article specifically was kind of challenging this idea of companies aren't openly admitting this, but is artificial intelligence a large contributor to this? Now, here's the thing. For those of you who might be listening, I run into folks who fall somewhere on the spectrum of AI is the end of days and it is driving layoffs, and ultimately we're all going to be unemployed, all the way back to the other side of, well, nah, it's not going to do really much of anything, and then everything in between. I don't know that this whole doomsday narrative of, AI is driving all these layoffs is necessarily helpful, in that, is AI a contributing factor to this in certain industries, in certain segments, some more than others? Absolutely. So I will say to the folks who may be going, oh, AI is never going to, affect my job or things like that. It absolutely will. And I will say, I'm in conversations with some senior leaders at different companies. I do know for a fact that AI is definitely influencing decisions. Now, whether they're directly tied to the layoffs, or where I hear it more is in workforce planning conversations. Do we really need to grow by this many employees, or what do we need to do with these functions? How might we plan for where we invest our resources and where we shift heads around? Less of the conversations, to be at least my experience, which is anecdotal, is that it's less of a, hey, AI's here, maybe we lay a bunch of people off. Now, is AI playing a role in that? Yes. And I think this is where the complication of this gets a lot more real, is the fact that AI is absolutely affecting the market, and it's affecting, certain companies and even their ability to deliver products and the value of their products to the market, which naturally, well, then there's less buyers, they're struggling financially, it's going to result in layoffs. So would I say, are there a lot of tentacles that we could hook back to artificial intelligence and say the disruption that's coming from artificial intelligence, the way it's disrupting skills, the way it's disrupting products, the way it's disrupting market dynamics? Yes, I would say there's a fair amount of hooks and tentacles that could be tied back to artificial intelligence and the broader impact it's having across the workforce, the market, all these other things. What I don't like about this, and this is one of the things that I didn't think the article represented terribly well, was I think the narrative that often gets represented and pushed out there is, oh, AI's here. Now companies are just going, AI's here. Let's lay a bunch of people off. I can just tell you, again, from my experience, conversations, different things I'm involved with, that's not really the way I'm seeing this play out. There are very few examples. There's one in particular that stands out. I won't disclose the details of it, but where that actually did happen, it was a smaller company and they had just said, I think we actually don't need these employees. Let's get rid of them and let's bring in AI to replace it. What's been interesting is that was even before the beginning of this year. I know this organization well. They've actually completely reversed it. They've actually said, and I think it was 2 weeks ago or something like that, where I said it's kind of funny watching some of these companies that brought in a bunch of robots and said we don't need people, and now they need people. They just need people for different purposes. It was a similar thing with this organization where they thought, hey, AI can do all this stuff that people were doing. We won't need the people. They quickly realized, oh, people were doing more than we realized, and now we're needing to rethink it. So, all that said, I think the one thing that's relatively new about this, if you have worked around blue collar industries, have been involved in blue collar stuff, this isn't new for anybody. I know this is hitting knowledge workers like a ton of bricks right now. Like, oh my goodness, what about the machines? Are they going to completely do away with me? But if you've worked on the shop floor, or if you've ever worked in manufacturing or anything like that, automation and robotics and technology replacing the threat of that replacing people is not new. So if you are someone who's thinking a chat GPT API is going to just take your job, probably, unless in foolish instances, I guess there may be examples. Like I said, there's one in particular that I go, well, that was a mistake. And they quickly learned from it. That said, and we'll talk about it a little bit later in my last point, if you think you're going to come out of this as a knowledge worker unscathed and things are not going to radically change for you in the coming years, that's the part that I would caution people against. So, is AI a large driver behind this? Yes, absolutely. Should people be on top of all the things that are just good career best practices, staying on the top of your game, making sure that you're adding value, making sure you're visible and providing support and seen as a valuable employee in your company. Like, those are all good. Stay up on your career stuff, keep your resume current, be having conversations outside your organization. So if, heaven forbid, your company makes a poor decision around AI layoffs, you're not just starting from square one. So my advice to people who may read or see some of this stuff about, oh, is AI driving these layoffs? Really, to anybody, I would say my best career advice to people, just do that stuff now. Don't do it because AI might be doing it. Just do it because it's a good thing to do, to put yourself in the best position you can possibly be in. Because at the end of the day, you're not going to be able to control a lot of this stuff. And if your company decides to make a move, you're not going to change it. And so just better to be prepared for that. So I just tend to, when I talk about this with people, set really realistic expectations. Because again, whether direct, oh, AI's here, let's lay people off, I don't see much of that. But AI is definitely playing a role in this. So that's where I'm at with this. Again, lots of concerns from folks across the board, many of them warranted. I agree, there's good reason to be concerned about some of this stuff. I think most of the concerns that I see from folks, though, can be mitigated through best practices in your work and career. And if you're doing those things, my observation is you still can't control what you can't control. So if you're but can you at least be as well positioned as humanly possible should something like that happen? Yes. And then more on the skills thing later. All right. So this one kind of, somebody sent this to me. I thought it was kind of interesting. So now there's this big boom for higher education universities to get into, let's create degree programs for artificial intelligence. And I looked into some of these programs, looked at what they offered, what the degree program was structured like. And honestly, a lot of them are specific to learning about machine learning, the different algorithms, data analytics, advanced robots. which is in the AI age, I think it's going to be important that we have people who have those skills. The reason I sigh and kind of rolled my eyes a little bit when I saw this was I'm concerned, and this is my concern to those of you who may be seeing this and thinking about, or is if you're like me and a parent and you're hearing this stuff and going, oh, so should I get my kid? Should I be grooming them or pushing them towards a degree program in artificial intelligence? I would back the truck up if that's where your head's at. To be completely honest, I would back the truck up in this. It's kind of similar to what I remember in, again, the late 90s, early 2000s, where it was like everybody needed to go get certification or be able to code HTML or be able to write JavaScript. Everybody needs to get into a coding program. Then as coding came up, everybody needs to be a coder. Every student needs to be building their coding skills, and every student needs to dive deep into, and every single one of these things ends up getting disrupted. So if you look at like the HTML stuff, it was like everybody needs to know how to build web pages from scratch and write HTML code. Oh, well, wait. And then came along things like Squarespace and Wix and these other point click features where you didn't really need, the average person did not need to know how to do this. Same with coding. Oh, everybody needs to know Python and be able to code and be able to do all this stuff. Oh, well, now AI can write a lot of code. And, if you know a lot of even just graphical user interfaces for coding anymore. It's been simplified. And so my caution to people is not to say, hey, if you are someone or you are coaching or you have kids who really have a passion for the highly technical stuff and they want to understand the advanced capabilities of this, okay, sure. Some of the programs look really interesting. I think we're going to definitely need people to go into those fields. Based on a conversation I had this week, I absolutely think we need more to encourage more diversity in those fields. We need more people from diverse backgrounds. I'm not just talking ethnically diverse, but like we do need more of that. We need people from different backgrounds. We need more of that. So I absolutely could we drive to have more diversity in these highly technical specialized programs to help address some of the bias in these systems and just getting different perspectives. Absolutely. Absolutely. So don't get me wrong that I think, advanced degree programs in artificial intelligence is a waste of time. No, but as I was reading some of the articles on this, it felt very similar to some of the stuff I've seen on repeat. I just think of the ecclesiastical wisdom of like we go in cycles. We think, oh, this is all brand new. And it's like nothing's new under the sun. And so this really had a lot of flavor, smelled, tasted, and sounded just like what I've seen, even in my limited lifetime of this stuff on repeat, where it was like, oh, everybody's going to need to go out and everybody should enroll in a Bachelor of Science in artificial intelligence. And I just think back to when the internet started bubbling up. The part that made me chuckle about this is, can you imagine if you went and got a bachelor's degree in internet? It's just one of those things where it's like, what? I don't think, and this will tie to my fourth point, I don't think we're fully there yet in appreciating the fact that artificial intelligence is going to become ubiquitous like the internet, where it is everywhere. It already is now. It's not like it will get there. It already is today. And it's only going to become more prevalent, more in the water we drink and the air we breathe. So instead of just trying to shoehorn everybody into this, like go into this field, this specific niche, I just feel like that's a mistake because I know plenty of people who absolutely, well, actually, every person I know is going to need to be comfortable, familiar with, and know how to work with artificial intelligence. Bottom line, 2024 and beyond, every single person is going to need to have some degree of acumen and comfort in working with artificial intelligence. Yet, not everybody needs to go into a specialized degree or even specialized field. It's not like, well, every industry, every function on the planet is just going to be absorbed by artificial intelligence. And all that's going to be left is just people working on machine learning algorithms and repairing robots. I don't know. And maybe the articles I came across were a little bit extremist, like most stuff is on the internet, trying to get people to click on it. But I'm curious other people's take on this. I know plenty of people who would be miserable going into any of the AI degree programs that I've seen. And if that's what they had to do for the rest of their life, they'd probably rather work at Home Depot greeting people than, this type of stuff. So if you're hearing some of this, if you see it and you're discouraged going, oh man, is that like the only future ahead? My take on that is no. And I don't think everybody's going to need to hyper specialize in AI skills and things like that. So that then transitions naturally, of course. Hey, we're talking about skills. Let's talk about the LinkedIn skills report, which was actually, well, just so you know, the LinkedIn Workplace Learning Report is coming out in March. That will go into a lot more detail. I'm involved in some of that, so I'm not at liberty to speak on some of the details of what's in that and what's coming there. But what I can talk about is the LinkedIn in demand skills. It was like I don't know if it was a report or a survey or something was done around the in demand skills. What was really interesting about this, contrasting my last point about these rise in degree programs and artificial intelligence, is when you look at the in demand skills, none of them had any sort of technical proficiency. None of them did. Not a single. The list was communication, customer service, leadership, management, I guess analytics, I'll give it that, teamwork, problem solving, and the number one key skill was adaptability. While all of these have technical intersections, not a single one of the most in demand skills in organizations had anything to do with machine learning, computer program, computer algorithms, building robot. Not a single one. So I say this to the people who out there who may not necessarily be super technical and love this, love all the technology, but go, does this mean that like my future is beholden to just either going into that or living on the street? No. No, and I think the in-demand skills thing, if anything, for me, just gave more validation to the point that, hey, we are still going to have a ton of diversity in work and jobs and fields and things that people can go into based on where they're uniquely gifted, what they really love doing. There's going to be a ton of this stuff. It's just the things that you're going to do to differentiate yourself aren't going to be those technical proficiencies. I actually looking through the curriculums, and maybe I spend way too much time on this, but looking through the curriculums of some of these the BS AI programs, not really. But as I looked in through the curriculum of some of these, I was actually concerned that I went, you know what? I actually feel like higher education is actually missing it in terms of what the companies are saying. This is what we desperately need from people. They're like, oh, you're going to be doing more with artificial intelligence? Great. Let's spin up a bunch of new degree programs that are highly technically focused on things. There are legitimately classes that I looked in some of these curriculums that I went, well, that's going to be obsolete in 2 years from now. By the time the person finishes the degree program, it's going to be obsolete. And there was nothing in these curriculums that tied to any of these in-demand skills. I did not see anything in the AI program about advanced business communication, how to influence without authority, to things like that, where you're like, those are going to be the skills that, yeah, are there going to be people who need to know the technical stuff? Yes. But what's going to differentiate them is not their hyper technical skills, or it's going to be a lot more difficult to differentiate with that. So that's good news for other folks who may go, I don't really care about the technology. I love communications, or I love project management, or I love whatever it is, creative stuff. Great, fantastic. That diversity, based on everything I'm seeing and reading, is still absolutely going to exist in 2024 and beyond. If anything, might the flavors look a little bit different? Might the way we apply them look a little bit different? Yeah, probably. That's going to change based on technology. But honestly, the skills, and I'm involved in a lot of different advisory boards, even just in my own organization, as we think about the skills we need in workforce planning, the skills that we're talking about, and even as we're going through the performance calibration cycles right now, the things that are actually differentiating employees are not how great they are at executing their technical skills. That is definitely part of the component of how decisions are made. but really their ability to lead well, their ability to communicate well, their ability to solve problems independently and come up with creative solutions. That's the stuff that is differentiating people. And that's across the board. Like nobody's like, nah, we don't care about marketing anymore because all we care about is our IT team. No, they're actually going, who in marketing, we still need it. It's still critical, but who in marketing is doing the marketing stuff well? Yes. And is adapting and adopting AI to help them with that. Yeah, that's important and it is good. And we need people who do that. But it really has more to do with, but how are they engaging with the other people? How are they working through some of these challenges? And again, going back to why I said before, everyone is going to need, regardless of your field or industry, everyone's going to need to adapt and adopt AI. Is the folks that don't, and these are just conversations that I have with people from across the board. The people who aren't adopting AI, this goes back to kind of like, is AI driving layoffs? Not necessarily, but is it connected to it? The people who aren't adopting and adapting to AI are going to start feeling the pressure, because what's happening is the consequence of that is they're just not operating as efficiently or as effectively as their peers who are adapting to it. And so as a result, it's showing up in performance and just the way they work. They're so nose down in the details because they're not allowing AI to take care of that. Their counterpart who has figured out how to let AI do some of that work and is focusing more on the interpersonal parts, they're standing out. And so I think this goes back to this point of, you're not going to lose your job to artificial intelligence. You are not going to be obligated to change your career to go into deep learning or robotic, whatever. You're not going to have to do that, but you are going to have to get comfortable with this stuff, or the people who do will be a threat to you. And so with that, I hope that's that may discourage some of you, but hopefully that's an encouragement to others of you who are like, I really love what I do. Am I going to have to change careers because of where AI is going? My my wisdom would say no, you're not. Are you going to have to get comfortable with doing things differently? Absolutely yes, but that's not new. That's neither new or a bad thing. So going back to something I said before, if you're doing all the career skills and all the things you should be doing for your career, I think you have very little to worry about, even though the world we're going to see in 2024 and 25 and 26 is going to look radically different than the world we saw in 2020, 21, and 22, things like that. So that's where I'm at. That is the end of this week's update. I hope you found it helpful and hopefully it keeps you on top of things. Again, I'm going to make the plug to encourage you to send things my way that you come across. I love engaging with the feedback and just the comments from folks. And if you have thoughts or you disagree with me, I'm okay with that too. I love hearing people with dissenting opinions, but I'd love to hear why. Rather, if you do disagree with me, don't just send me a thing and say your point of view is stupid or I don't think you're right. I actually would love to hear why. What about it do you disagree with? What are you seeing? What different observations are you making? Because I recognize my vantage point is limited and there are things I'm not necessarily seeing with 100% clarity. And I love when others bring that to light for me. So with that, I hope you have a wonderful Friday, a wonderful rest of your week, whatever you're doing, and a great weekend. We will see you on the other side.